All right, we have a very special guest with us today. His achievements and character and profile really warrant no introduction at all, but we're going to try to give him one anyway. He is a singular icon within our sport and culture of surfing. His legacy spans over 50 plus years in surfing, shaping, yoga, and much more. And his influence is so ingrained into the fabric of surfing that the ripple effects of his story have touched virtually every surfer on the planet over the past several decades. His style, fearlessness, and prowess in waves of consequence was so ahead of its time that he is to this day synonymous with the most dangerous wave on the planet. And for the second time on this podcast, which is what a personal honor for me, we have Mr. Pipeline himself, Gerry Lopez, on the lineup. Gerry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me back. I thought after the first time that, that was it.
No way.
Okay, we did him. Get rid of him.
You can come back weekly if you want, man. Yeah.
I don't know who you were just talking about, but it sure didn't sound like me.
Well, the last time we spoke, Gerry, you highlighted that you tend to divide your time between your home base in Oregon and the occasional trip, whether it's a surf trip or I think you're getting into foiling the last time we spoke, yoga trip. Where are you speaking to us from today?
Yeah, I'm in the Baja, down here near Los Cabos, what we call the East Cape, and had a wonderful surf this morning. Little south swell trickled in, and I think this is, especially at my age, kind of it's definitely not the white flag lap, but I think the Baja is going to be my last hurrah. Not getting any younger, but still, Miguel and I were just talking about how, he was saying how much surfing, how it grabbed a hold of him, later in life in his 20s. And he goes, I don't know if you'll understand that. And I said, yeah, I'm in my 70s and it's grabbing a hold of me again, just like you. So, yeah, I guess I'm trying to be a surfer again.
That's interesting. Well, and so when you go to Baja for like this trip, how long do you tend to stay down there? And on this particular trip, like what kind of boards are you riding? And when you say you're rediscovering it in your 70s, talk a little bit more about that for us.
Well, surfing, at least for me anyway, has been a long, long road. And, I've, as we showed in the movie, I've strayed off that road quite a bit. In the 80s, I got into windsurfing and, didn't even take the surfboards down to the beach for a long while. And then I got into snowboarding and we moved up to Oregon, still there, been there 30 something years. And so in a way, I've strayed along the way. And, then there was the stand-up paddle surfing and kite surfing and now the wing foiling and the surf foiling and, all that stuff. But it always comes back to the surfing because I guess surfing is the simplest. Maybe I've been doing it the longest, but just what Miguel was saying about how, it's, I guess, grabbed his heart. It continues to do that to me. And, like I said, as I stray now and then from it and get interested in these other things, it always circles right back to surfing. And I guess that's a good thing.
Well, and I'm curious too, because this is something that I think most surfers go through. I know I'm going through it, but when I was younger, I felt like I had to surf every day as much as possible. I'm like, I have to do this. And now that, I'm 40, I've got kids and, job and mortgage, all this stuff, it's obviously
Right.
logistically not as feasible. But I've found other things, like recently in the last few years, like rock climbing or something, where the contrast with surfing, it's like I actually feel like I'm getting better at surfing not doing it as much. Where I'm like the amount of time and energy I was wasting trying to hunt tides and sandbars and this and that, I just don't have the time to do it anymore. And I was always worried it was going to drop off. But now I'm like, actually, I am surfing better every time I go out. And I'm wondering, in your own experience, if you had a similar arc where you were really obsessed with it when you were younger, but then you would step away. And of course, there's the physical side of it that we can't control because we age. But I'd imagine that time away and learning different disciplines, and when you come back, there's not only renewed joy, but you might find that you're better at some things as well. Have you experienced that yourself?
Well, I mean, surfing doesn't take just some of your time. It takes it all. And, when you're young, you have that time and you're able to, even though, you think you have to do it, well, it's more that you want to do it and you're able to do it. And then, of course, life comes along and, everything else. And so you have to, okay, temper that with, I got to choose my times to be able to go surfing. And I think the cerebral part, the thinking about it part, you get better at it.
Mm.
And I think that, you're at that stage where you think about a lot of things, but when you think about surfing, you think, good things about it. And so the next time you go, you've got all that positive energy behind you and you go out there and, it's not like you have to have a good time because you're past that you just know that you're going to have a good time and you're going to feel better for it no matter what happens, whether you only get a couple of waves or, you get a whole bunch. And it doesn't matter the way it used to. And I think that's the beauty of surfing is that it's something, if you're going to embrace it, it's going to embrace you back. And you really get a lot of return, a lot more than I think you do from, I don't know, everything else
Sure.
I've tried.
Right.
But, which is the reason that I keep circling back to it and, getting re-energized, re-stoked, feeling that maybe at this point in my life, I got to go surfing as much as I can every day if I could. But, of course, that's not possible. So it's like it goes through this cycle,
Yeah.
and it's a circular thing. And you just do what you can, and in a way, I've talked a lot about, especially recently, about yoga and surfing and how I've always thought that they were similar paths.
Mm.
And then, after thinking about that for 20-something years, I said, oh, they're parallel paths.
Mm.
And now, 50 years later, they're the same path.
Oh, interesting. Well,
And
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because, we joked about how you need no introduction. I think that's pretty fair to most, if not all, lineup podcast listeners. But what we got to experience on that last podcast with yourself and Stacey Peralta is that despite how quote unquote well known you are in the surfing world, that Peralta documentary, The Yin and Yang of Gerry Lopez, was really revealing in terms of parts of your life that the public maybe didn't know previously or didn't think of when they thought of you. And I have to ask for you personally, has anything changed with you with the way that you interact with fans following the release of that film? Like, do they ask you different types of questions now that they've seen it?
Um, maybe.
Hmm.
I don't know. You know, there seems like there's a lot more people recognize me in kind of funny places where I never expect to be recognized. And, you know, generally speaking, in fact, pretty much 100% of the time, they're all really nice people. And it's become an interesting thing for me that, you know, to meet these people in these like different settings and, you know, just if it's just for a moment, get to know them a little bit and go, wow, oh, that was kind of cool. I mean, you know, just to interact with another person just out of the blue. And, you know, that's kind of what life is. I mean, it's pretty much, it's all about the relationships you have with other people. And, you know, I guess that's a good thing too.
It is interesting. I think of this a lot, like having worked here for almost 2 decades. And I think we talked about it a little in the last episode about it the yin and yang is actually a good thing where you have this contrast in surfing when you have figures like yourself or you know, Kelly Slaters and Lisa Andersons and Steph Gilmores and stuff like that. Like people that within the surfing world are deified, you know, because of their acts and their achievement and what they can do. But at the same time, because surfing's fairly fringe relative to a lot of other sport and entertainment products, you're still able to kind of walk down the street most of the time without being harassed as much as, you know, maybe like a Hollywood star or an NBA star. I've always felt like that's maybe the ideal. I guess the grass is always greener, but I'm sure that superstars in other sports and you know, Marvel movies or whatever it is, look at amazing surfers and go, what an incredible life. And also they can live a relatively normal life and unmolested by the general public. I mean, you've been around the sport for so long. Has that been your experience in the sense that you go, yeah, I get a lot of attention within surfing, but then I can live like a normal life relatively outside of it?
Exactly. I mean, when we moved to Bend, which was, boy, 92, 93, and then, you know, we decided, well, we're going to try and spend some time there. And this is Central Oregon. I mean, we're 200 miles from the ocean and, you know, completely different, I guess, kind of lifestyle than what people would expect me to be living in, and certainly different from any I'd lived before. And it was really great, you know, being Alex's father. And that was the extent of it. And, you know, later on, they kind of learned a little bit, you know, about my background and stuff. But, you know, years later. And so, you know, these friendships developed out of just being, you know, we were all fathers.
Right.
The kids were all going to school together. And, you know, fathers and mothers. And, you know, most of those, in fact, all of those friendships have endured.
Yeah.
And we're still great friends with the parents. And, you know, the kids have all grown up and are mostly gone, but, yeah, we still laugh about, well, yeah, you never knew who you were. You were just Alex's
Right.
father.
Right.
And that was great.
You never know who your neighbor's going to be. And I think I told you this story last time, but I mean, I can look out my window right now. It's 10 feet away. But one of your friends, the actor Greg Harrison, who played Chandler in North Shore, is my neighbor. And I didn't know
he's
that.
A sweetheart.
He's amazing. He's such a good guy. But I had no idea who he was, just a nice neighbor. And then I kind of figured out that he worked in the entertainment industry. And I was like, oh, maybe he is like a writer or a producer. I don't know. Like, and then I IMDb'd him. Maybe I'll get lucky. And then like jaw was on the ground where I'm like, wow, Chandler's my neighbor. Wow. Like share a fence with him. And I didn't bring it up with him for like another 3 years because I didn't want him to say anything.
Oh,
but he's a good dude.
But he's a sweetheart. Yeah.
Well, without going into too much biographical detail on today's podcast, because for the listeners that haven't seen the yin and yang of Gerry Lopez, everyone should absolutely do it. But I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the genesis of your health and well-being journey. You know, the surfing lifestyle is one thing, but and potentially even more so with the fame and money of the professional surfing lifestyle, I don't think it necessarily goes hand in hand with health and well-being. But for you personally, was diet and fitness and yoga and meditation, was that something that was always a part of your life, or did you come to it for a specific reason?
You know, I started surfing when I was 10 years old. That was the late 1950s. And the surfing lifestyle, quote unquote, was not one that any sane parent wanted their child to even be near, you know, let alone be a part of, because, you know, in order to be a hardcore surfer, especially back then, you couldn't have a job, you know, not a regular job, because if the surf came up and you had to go to work, well, then you weren't a hardcore surfer anymore. So most surfers and the surfing lifestyle, you know, if they had a car, they might have lived in it, or, you know, otherwise, because they didn't work, they all had to band together to live in some, you know, crappy house to be able to afford the rent, and, you know, not having any money to, well, you know, you could climb the coconut trees and, you know, steal mangoes and papayas from other people's yards, but the diet wasn't that great either, because, you know, you're probably living on pork and beans and, you know, not that great of food. And it really was, I got into my yoga practice in 1968, and that was pretty much about the same time that I was starting to get serious about surfing. Mm-hmm. And the surfing lifestyle that you see today that's, you know, very health conscious, I mean, absolutely was based entirely on the yoga lifestyle that, you know, I was studying and reading about and trying to live. And, you know, the 5 basic tenets of yoga, the proper exercise, proper breathing, proper relaxation, proper diet, and positive thoughts and meditation. These were all the things that went hand in glove with surfing. Mm. And I think, you know, what is looked at today as the healthy surfing lifestyle, at least certainly for me, came from yoga studies. And, you know, now, I mean, with so much information available, that people look at it and realize that, man, if I want to keep doing this, you know, I got to start doing this to make sure that I'm able to continue. And I think that's really all it is.
Yeah. And I mean, we see it so often, not just in surfing, but in other sports too. It's a little bit like the folly of youth is the myth of immortality, right? When you're young, you're like, I'm never going to get hurt. I'm never going to die. Right. This is going to be great.
Bulletproof.
I'm Peter Pan, like whatever. Like, but oftentimes it's like a catalyzing incident, you know, like Mick Fanning's a great example, right? When we tore his hamstring in Indonesia, this is like 03, 04, 05. He was obviously very talented and very successful before that. But after that, he became very focused on his health and well-being and his fitness. For you, you were still very young when you came to yoga. Like, did you have someone that introduced it to you? Was there some sort of incident where you said, look, I have to I have to start living a little differently, and this is maybe a path I should explore? Or did you just kind of, come to it via fate?
I think actually fate had pretty much more to do with it than anything else because, in the late 60s, I mean, a yoga class or a yoga teacher in Hawaii was pretty impossible to find. And, generally, a yoga practice, you are encouraged to find a guru. But, I like to fantasize that, maybe I had a yoga practice in a past life. And so, somewhere spiritually, I knew that this was a good path. And so it made it much easier for me to follow that path. And, of course, there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of straying from that path along the way, but eventually, it always came back to that path. And the whole health and conditioning and trying to keep that surfing goal in mind, just kind of made it happen naturally. And there wasn't, any real struggle to follow that path at all.
It makes sense, and I know it's something that we talked about a little bit last time. It's certainly an awesome part of the yin and yang of Gerry Lopez film, but it's something that comes up with a lot of our guests. And we do speak to a lot of young surfers. We speak to a lot of CT surfers, but it feels like there is often this inflection point when you're young and you're getting paid to do something you love. These big brands, and I guess that's just life and capitalism, are really kind of dictating your options and your opportunities and how you're branded and what projects you work on and how you are collaboratively being expressed to the world. As you achieve more and get more agency and just mature, a lot of times you see surfers then having more agency and going, I'm going to choose who I want to work with, which brand. I'm going to choose what projects I want to work with. And it seems like, as we talked about earlier, through those many disciplines and interests and activities that you've pursued, you've been able to do that quite frequently. And I think that feels like you have some real alignment between the brands you work with even today and the projects you work on. Is that a fair assessment?
I remember, being shocked when, the first time somebody wanted to give me a surfboard, or, somebody that was in the very small industry of surfing at the time, the Maestro brothers wanting to give me a wetsuit vest, and I was just like, so grateful for that, wow, that's really special, what can I do to help them? And over the years, and it's happened, certainly in my lifetime and very quickly, surfing has grown so much, and, that whole sponsorship thing has really changed.
Right.
And really the first ones who, had the idea that they were going to get paid to go surfing certainly wasn't us. I mean, when Sean and Michael Thompson and PT and Ian, all started coming to the North Shore, and they were the ones that were saying, yeah, we're going to get paid to go surfing. And I remember BK and I just looking at these guys, because we were all surfing in the contest together, going, and we'd look at each other and go, these guys are kidding, right? Nobody's going to pay you to go surfing. That's absurd. And boy, were they right, and I mean, that's life, is that you do have choices. There weren't those kinds of choices for us back then.
Right.
It certainly wasn't the beginning of surfing, but the beginning of the professional side of surfing. And I guess you get to choose, and, a lot of times you don't choose right. And hopefully, the opportunity comes that you get to change your mind and, make the better choices along the way before you crash and burn. And I think that, I look at surfing now and I look at these top guys, I go, wow, these guys are really professional. And, it's a beautiful thing because, it's happened completely and utterly in my lifetime. So I've been able to see it, being fully cognizant of the fact that, are you kidding? Nobody's ever going to pay you to go surfing, to, now, wow, they're really paying you very well. I mean, this is nice. And I think that's great. And, I think that there was a point there, maybe midway through, where there was a lot of guys with a lot of talent that, were getting paid to go surfing and didn't make a lot of good choices and, ended up crashing and burning. And I think that you see less and less of that today, that these guys have gotten not only a lot better at surfing, but a lot smarter at picking the right course.
That's a fair point and well observed. On the topic of partners, we are going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to bring on a special guest with Gerry to talk about your partnership with Manduka. We will be right back. All right, we are back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with the iconic Gerry Lopez, and we are joined for this segment by a very special guest. She spearheads the leading brand of yoga mats and yoga accessories, and a brand whose mission is to inspire the growth and practice of yoga. On that front, she has partnered with our esteemed guest today, Mr. Gerry Lopez. She's also been a part of several leadership teams for Dakine, Roxy, 2XU, Saucony. Welcome, CEO of Manduka, Pamela Levine. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Dave, thanks for having me. And Gerry, I'm ear to ear, smiling ear to ear, being here with you. So, yeah.
So we're recording this. It's a Wednesday. You are a CEO, and I've orbited people who have had that job at different places over the course of my career. It's a busy job. So thank you for taking the time today. What is a day like a Wednesday look like for the CEO of Manduka, outside of getting to talk to Gerry and myself?
Well, it's never the same. So every day is different. I think for me, it centers around humans, and it's the humans that are on my team and the humans that are teaching yoga. That's really where I'm spending the majority of my time. Today, we're working on new product that are taking care of practitioners home and on the road, as well as in the studio. And yeah, later today, I'm meeting up with a couple teachers and on what's their journey looking like. And here I'm with another amazing human, Gerry. So that's really where I spend a majority of my time these days. Yep.
I feel like, Pamela, we could probably have our own like capsule episode, because I think our listeners, well, I bring that up because I think we'll call it the outdoor industry, but for our purposes, we're talking about surfing. I think there's so many people around the world, whether they live on the coast, whether they live inland, whether they surf or not, that look at it as such an aspirational space to have a profession. But as we kind of joked about in the first segment, sometimes it's pretty niche, sometimes it's pretty impenetrable, But for someone like yourself, like how did you get started in the outdoor space? Like where did you grow up? Like what were your interests coming up and how did you get started just professionally in this space?
Yes, I mean, I feel very lucky actually. I think a little bit's fate
Mm.
and a little bit's just great people. I'm originally from New Jersey, so I'm an East Coast woman and moved out to LA. Actually, a mentor of mine needed someone. I was working for Saucony, the running shoe company, and he needed someone at a company that we had both gone to subsequently after that. But when I landed in LA and I moved to Manhattan Beach, and I remember being like, what's going on here? This amazing lifestyle. And I ended up, there was an opening at Quicksilver, and I applied online. And the next thing I knew, I got connected to a few people there and ended up joining an amazing team at Roxy. And I walked into this culture of surf that is, for most of us that have gone to the beach, own something from Roxy or Quicksilver, some of the other great brands. But when you live on the West Coast and you drive up and down and stop at places like Trestles, it's a different experience and such a amazing culture to be part of. So yeah, that started my journey. And from there, I just had amazing mentors and partners. And I played tennis in college, so I was a captain of the team. And so I like to just naturally lead. I think I'm the youngest of two brothers, so an active athlete. And yeah, and it just ended up spending time with the leadership teams. And the rest is just the history of good people taking care of me and working hard. Yeah.
I love it. And when it comes to Manduka, can you give us just a little overview about what it is and how it sets itself apart from other brands that are focused in the yoga space?
It's so interesting because the yoga philosophy really comes from a place of abundance. So I love every brand that's encouraging the practice of yoga. And Manduka, it's our singular mission. So a lot of brands in the space talk a lot about yoga and other activities. And I think the thing that separates Manduka is that it is our focus. So for me, who's an athlete, who yoga is a complement, it's such a big part of my life, not just physically, but mentally. And the athletes today, especially post-COVID, so many action sports athletes and all mainstream athlete sports that, the main four, the mental part. So call it mindfulness, call it meditation, and really yoga, as people think about it, is just meditation in motion. Manduka is just singularly focused on getting more people on a yoga mat and that's the reason I'm here, is I just believe more people on a yoga mat's a better world. And I think that's where Gerry and I found each other and have a unique and similar point of view.
I like it. Gerry, we touched on this in the first segment, but you're essentially a polymath across all these different activities. You're such an expert and you're so respected. And your practice of yoga, it spans over 50 years. And I can imagine over the course of that time, probably every day, probably today, you're getting offered opportunities to partner with different brands and different products for all manner of things. What was the catalyst for you in your decision to partner with Manduka?
Their yoga mats were better than anyone else's. And, I come from a time when there was no such thing as a yoga mat, unless you had a towel or, which you were lucky to even have that. And so as, my practice evolved and I suddenly discovered that there were companies that did make yoga mats, and I started trying them, and found out that, wow, I really like these ones. And so, kind of serendipitous that suddenly here Pam and I are doing something together that from something that, I connected with, I don't know, long ago, long before this started happening. And, it's interesting that, Pam had her foot in the surf industry for a long time, but then she's had her feet in the, in Manduka and in the yoga industry for maybe even longer. And, as Dave, you and I were talking earlier that suddenly I'm looking at yoga and surfing as being, the same path to hopefully some kind of enlightenment that here Pam and I are together.
I'm glad you brought that up, 'cause my next question is for you, Pamela. And with that background in the outdoor space at brands like Roxy, you were obviously aware of Gerry and became aware of Gerry and the fact that he's not only an iconic surfer, but an iconic practitioner of yoga. Walk us through your courtship of Gerry Lopez en route to this partnership. How long did it take? What'd you do to seduce him? Like how'd all this work for you?
I mean,
30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. We got connected. So I was most recently at Dakine running, working on the leadership team there. And I had an amazing partner there. Her name was Colleen Quigley, if she's listening. And she's actually at Patagonia now. And Colleen, again, through the family of Ohana, you connect with great humans. She knew at Manduka we were on a mission that was bigger than maybe the audience we were speaking to. And we were texting and she mentioned Gerry and I said, can you connect us? And I think Gerry and I exchanged a couple texts. We got on the phone and a new friendship was made, and it didn't take long. I think when you come from an organic place and you come with an open heart and you just want to do great things, and again, great product helps. It just seemed natural, Gerry. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's how it felt for me.
Well, the way it felt for me is especially, today, looking back, thinking, I think you and I must have done something in past lives.
Yes. And our team too, we have our head of product comes from Action Sports. He was at Patagonia for a long time and he was at ARC most recently. And so I think there's just a love of these figures. To know Gerry is to love him. I think even if you don't know Gerry, it's just the love and light that he represents. But I think we're all on the same path, which is when we're on a surfboard or we're on a snowboard. And again, I've only done a couple times surfing. From my friends at family at Dakine took me. I think my first surf was in Maui, Micah Nickens, famous Dakine athlete. And then the other crew quick took me to Puerto Rico. So been on board, but you can appreciate that you have to be so in the moment.
Yeah.
And yoga is the same way, and meditation. And I think that energy, just the more people that do it, I just think it makes your sport better and really just makes your life better and your community. And I think, Gerry, you said it to me. I feel like yoga is a solve for the climate crisis. I think that was the first comment you said to me. And I said, wow, that's big. And I agree. Yeah.
Well,
Decisions we make.
Gerry, can you expand on that a little bit? Because I'm a pretty abstract thinker. I could come up with some theories about how yoga is a legitimately potential solution for the climate crisis. But what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think what we're looking at in our world today is an epidemic of mental weakness. Mm-hmm. And yoga is the path to not only strengthening your mind, but, hopefully getting some kind of control over it. And I think that that's really the way that, before we can even cure the planet, we have to cure ourselves of all the things that plague each and every one of us. And that's the path of yoga. That's where yoga ultimately is headed for. Of course, it's the path goes a lot further than that too. Ultimately you want to reach that level that Yogananda enjoyed his entire life, the samadhi, super conscious state. But, like Buddha was once asked, what did he gain from meditation? And he answered, nothing. But I lost anger, anxiety, depression, insecurity, and fear of old age and death. And, you think, wow, those are the things that everybody's afraid of. And we can get rid of those things. And all we have to do is, like Stacy, meditate for 3 hours a day. But, that's something. I mean, that's one of the choices that we were talking about. And everybody can choose that if they want. I mean, just get a yoga mat and start standing on your head. And, that's a beginning. And it's simple, really, but sometimes, the hardest things are the simplest things. And, well, that's the battle that Pam and I have, is trying to get people to go, hey, try this.
I love that answer because it's so easy. We can talk about climate change, but like really any issue and anyone, it's so easy to be so in the weeds that you don't pick your head up long enough to go, I thought I was fixing this issue, but I actually have to swim further upstream to kind of see where this came from. And to your point, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do via whatever, politics or economics or social movements, et cetera. But if the people involved in all that aren't looking inward and kind of fixing themselves to begin with, or not so much fixing themselves, but working on themselves and getting themselves to a place where they understand that things can get better organically and that can permanently get better, you're risking it kind of backsliding into something that doesn't quite work. Pamela, I had another question, because as CEO of Manduka, in part, I'd imagine that you're in charge of company culture. At the World Surf League, we have this interesting thing where there will sometimes be not accusations, but maybe presumptions that people are like hardcore surfers, don't give a shit about business, don't think about any of the things. They're like, why can't we just go to Indonesia for 10 events and who cares about the P&L, et cetera? Or you get the other end of the spectrum. You get people who maybe came from way outside of surfing and have never even been in the ocean. And, a big part of my job is trying to integrate between these spaces. And obviously people are along the spectrum, but I've always said that, people shouldn't feel insecure about applying for a job or working for the World Surf League if they don't surf. That's not a requirement. You should have an appreciation for it. But I always say for it to work, we need surfers that can look outside of surfing and non-surfers that can look inside of surfing. And that balance is going to give us the best chance for success. At Manduka, is it similar with yoga? Does everyone at Manduka practice yoga? Or do you kind of have a similar balance that we strive for at the World Surf League?
The balance is everything. And even though we focus on yoga teachers and yoga practitioners, what is a yoga practitioner? Is it someone that gardens for 5 minutes in the morning and has a cup of coffee and has a mindfulness moment? Is it someone that does a 30-minute yoga practice? I think it's so much more diverse today. And our staff represents that. I mean, the culture, someone asked me actually, ironically, Dave, this week about culture, and I'm not a big put it on a board. And you remember those days when you used to have like your top 5 culture points.
There's an acronym that spells out cheer. Or say, okay.
Exactly. Team or whatever.
Right,
and I think for me, it really just comes down to, I just started thinking about the humans that are coming towards the brand. And they're really athletes that are leading with heart. That sentence just felt so right. They might be athletes in that they're active. It might be athletes that they work hard. It might be athletes that they're just really going after it and sending it. And I think for me, that's the type of human, and they're leading with heart and trying to have fun. People always say, oh, I'm not good at yoga. I'm like, what does that even mean? It's not a professional sport. Like, just sit in a chair and just take a box breath. And there's so many resources out there. Manduka.com has some. And you could just search online for 2-minute meditation or 15 or a 30-minute yoga class. I think just taking it down to a notch where it should just actually be playful. And that also takes our staff into a much more, and that's a place that I'm trying to take our staff into, a much more playful place and have it not feel so serious while we're, trying to grow, our business and the lifestyle of yoga.
It makes a ton of sense. And I think it's as someone who has practiced, who doesn't practice enough, who would, I'm a ready convert. I'll put it that way because I know I need to do it. But it feels like one of the non-physical benefits of yoga is also just a greater appreciation that it's not results or success. There is no destination that you're ever going to get to. It is that appreciation of the journey, which, as a father of 10-year-old twins, it's interesting with them now because, my son, for example, he likes the idea of being a rock god, but doesn't necessarily like the idea of practicing guitar. And I'm like, whomst amongst us, buddy? Like, I really like the idea of being a rock god too, but like, we have to practice. And it's fun working with them and then reflecting on just whatever activity I'm working on too, because it's like, hey, don't worry about the goal, like worry about not worry, but enjoy the process. And when you enjoy the process, you've already won. And it's all, I'm sure every parent feels the same. Like, I taught my kid and I was really teaching myself, and it worked a lot. Gerry, I want to nerd out for a second about a place that I've had the very good fortune to at least visit once. But it's a venue that was featured heavily in your documentary, The Yin and Yang of Gerry Lopez. It was also featured in the ghosted documentary from Michael Oblowitz, The Sea of Darkness, about Indonesia. But Garajagan, Indonesia, it feels like that was a very influential turning point in your life. And we talked about this in our last conversation, but I want you, if you can, maybe reiterate your experiences there and how your years-long practice at that point of yoga helped you be present, helped you eliminate distractions, and help you connect with somewhere that is almost one of these spiritual centers for surfing in a lot of ways. Can you talk to us a little bit about your time at Garajagan and how the practice of yoga had an impact on that?
Well, to begin with, G-Land was certainly the most challenging wave. Even much more so than the pipeline, as far as, degree of difficulty and being able to stay there to, make some kind of impression as far as my surfing went, impression upon myself to be a little more effective, to basically, be able to make the wave, because it's a long wave, and people would, say, well, how long is it? And I'd, go from there to there, and they go, no, that's impossible. And I go, no, that's the way it was. And to get from there to there was, like life. There was a lot of twists and turns and lumps and bumps, and it was so much more than just surfing that wave. There was the whole being there, and you're in the middle of nowhere, and you had to kind of keep it all together. So it was really, for me, like it was a surfing monastery where, if I was a Zen monk, that they would send me, and, there was always the head monk with the big stick, waiting to smack you on the back of the head when you lost concentration and focus. And it was really a beautiful thing. And I spent a lot of years there and a lot of time, and, it was really interesting trying to get some of the other guys into a little yoga practice and, not very successfully, but it kind of encouraged me to pursue mine a little bit more. And, for a lot of people, me included, that, well, you don't have time for one or the other, if you're focused so hard on one. And I think paddling a surfboard out, especially if it's a long ways, is a very excellent asana, you know, a vinyasa actually. And people go, well, yeah, but that's not on a yoga mat. Yeah, but it's kind of the same thing, you know, the mind, the body, the coordination between the two, and just the input from where you are, which is probably the most beautiful thing in the world, you know, this paddling out through waves on the ocean. And yeah, I look back at those times and just go, wow, very, very special.
I want to know who these heathens are that didn't convert to yoga with Gerry Lopez in the must be the most ideal setting of the remote jungles of East Java, but maybe that's another podcast. You know, Pamela, like, you know, as CEO, very, very busy lifestyle. And for those of us that don't day to day, you know, in a venue like East Java in the 1970s, very impossible for most of us these days. But for those of us that have to commute or have kids or have a job, what are your tips for people that want to get into yoga or maybe to advance in yoga, and if they apply, like, how do you use them in your own day to day as CEO of a major company?
Well, David, it wouldn't be right for me to say get yourself a great yoga mat. Of course,
it wouldn't be wrong, but that's okay. All right.
But that's a great start.
I mean, and I'm serious in that. And I only say that because Gerry practices on the Manduka Pro, and that's the collaboration we did, a special mat for him. And the reason I say that is because when you're on an amazing mat, just like an amazing wetsuit, I remember you get on that great board, you're like, oh my God, it almost inspires you, right? And so
it does.
Really, I'm funny about it, but I'm also very serious. And so equipment is the first place I'd start. And then for me, my other recommendation is just really finding a great teacher. The teacher is everything. It's like a coach. It's like, I remember when I tried surfing in Manhattan Beach with a friend for the first time. For anyone that has been in these waves here, good luck if that's your first time. And I was with, I think, a Gerry foam board that I bought at Costco. I mean, it was not a great, I think I broke the board. Anyway, so I think, you really have to have someone that shows you the ropes. And that takes a few. I think Gerry said it's a little trial and error, and you just have to be patient. And so sometimes you get online and hear someone's voice and it just hits right. And you're like, oh, that's a teacher I want to follow. Or they say a few things that just touches you. And you're like, oh, this person speaks my language. And I think that's the biggest unlock. I always hear it's about the teacher. It's about the teacher. It's about the teacher. And I think, Gerry, I don't know what you would say, but for me, that's what I always find.
No, absolutely. I mean, the first big step that any surfer takes in surfing is when they get their own surfboard. And when you get your own yoga mat, that's something that's very inspiring, and it will, not only motivate you, but shame you to, okay, well, at least I'm going to go sit on that mat. And, when you're sitting on a yoga mat, then you start thinking about yoga. Yeah. And that's the first step.
Yeah.
It's a great answer. Pamela, I know you're busy. Really appreciate your time here. Before you go, can you let our listeners know where they can check out the Manduka products? Websites, better shops? Yep. Where can we go check these out?
Yeah, just simply go to manduka.com, manduka.com, and you'll find the Gerry Lopez collection. That would be a great place to start. It really is our best mats and towels. And really, the towels also can be used for surfers. A lot of surfers use some of our towels for leaving them in the car, and just great for wiping off after. So multi-use. But yeah, that's where I would go.
Great. Thank you so much, Pamela. And we're going to check it out. I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And great to see you, Gerry.
Thanks, Pam.
All right.
Love you.
I love you too.
All right, we are back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I am Dave Prodan. We are here with the one and only Gerry Lopez. Gerry, this has been a really pleasurable experience getting to talk to you and then Pamela as well about the work you guys are doing at Manduka. Last time you came on, we talked about this, and it was kind of this broad conversation about a surfer's life is marked with you get older, you get physically stronger, you're also gaining experience, but at some point, as we all do, the physical gifts we have and develop, they start to atrophy a bit, whether it's strength, it's aging, etc. But the experience continues to go up because you're still banking all that experience. And it's actually something I talked to Kelly Slater about a lot too, where I'm like, man, you're still at such a high level and the amount of experience you have must be so insane. But for him in particular, it's like, as we all go through this aging process, it must be a real hard disconnect for him, knowing that he knows how to do all these things, but maybe the body isn't doing what it used to do. And for someone like yourself, the benefits of practicing yoga and the longevity it's provided to you, not just in surfing, but snowboarding, paddleboarding, whatever discipline it is. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And have you ever imagined a life where, if you hadn't practiced yoga, where you would be at these different kind of activities at age 75?
Yeah, I think without yoga, I'd be on the couch watching TV like a lot of my friends are right now. Let me talk about the beginning. To kind of set the stage. In the beginning, because now I see that, with all the information available, that I saw a posting that Jack Robinson did where he was doing a very advanced yoga kriya, a cleansing exercise known as nauli or churning. And I went, wow, here's this guy. He's one of the top surfers, and he must have a yoga practice. Either that or he's got a very good yoga guru to teach him this, and I just go, that's really cool. And, in the beginning for me, yoga, I thought the first thing was that, it's going to make me a better surfer. And I had no idea that, obviously as I practiced it and everything, I realized that the strength and flexibility were, key to the physical part of yoga. But what it really helped me with, as you know, surfing is something that's endlessly and infinitely frustrating and disappointing. And it's just the nature of it. You try to become better at it, and the ocean is the one that's calling the shots. And, then I would enter surf contests because back then that's what any kind of, quote unquote, aspiring surfer would do. And, that was just like really setting yourself up for more frustration and disappointment. And that's where I really gained something initially from yoga that, I hadn't had before, of how to deal with that and how to accept that, winning wasn't anywhere near as important as mastering myself, mastering my mind, mastering, my own expectations, and, not going down that rabbit hole of frustration and disappointment. And I think that, of course, now the stakes are much higher for these surfers, but still there's, it's kind of relative. Right. And it's, each person has their own mind and they have to deal with it in whatever manner they can figure out how to deal with it. And yoga was very, very helpful in allowing me to deal with my mind in a way that I think really made a difference for me.
It's a great point. And I love what you said, that surfing is just saying the truth, right? Surfing is frustrating, whether you're a professional surfer or endlessly frustrating. But there's something to that where I've thought about this a lot, and we used to talk about it quite a bit when there would be cases of very high-level surfers. Andy Irons was one of them too, where it overlapped with kind of a bipolar disorder, right? And I said, well, if you think about it, there is no real middle ground in surfing. You're either sitting there doing nothing, waiting for waves, or you're up and riding, which is like the most physically and mentally stimulating thing you can be doing. There's no in between. And you're either surfing or you're back in your regular life. You're either traveling or not. And I think that if you're not a well put together person, or you don't have that kind of, you're not doing the practice of balance in your day-to-day life, it can feel nasty. I mean, on a very low level, like I felt like this when I was touring early on, just because you're like, yeah, why wouldn't I have a pizza for breakfast? Or like, why wouldn't I have a 12-pack tonight? Like, I'm tired and I'm stressed and there's maybe trauma that I haven't processed or whatever it is. But, as you get older, you kind of try to level that stuff out. And whether it's something like yoga or meditation or whatever people find, there's that quote from the Chuck Palahniuk book became a film, but Fight Club. And it was, Fight Club became the reason to cut your hair short and trim your fingernails. And I always think of that when you find something that is motivating in your life, to be like, maybe I should eat better. Maybe I should practice yoga. And it sounds silly, and I don't fault anyone that gets to my age or gets to your age or whatever it is, that is like, I'm tired and I'm out of shape and I want to just watch TV. I get that. But there are things you can do, and there's things you can bring into your life that can send you on a different path. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Well, I mean, that's it exactly. And, it again comes down to choices. Right. And the person who makes the choices for yourself is you. You can blame anyone you want, but ultimately you choose. And, you get a lot of opportunities to make bad choices and then, maybe hopefully learn something from them and then turn it around and make a better choice. And this is life. I mean, and, I always like to say that, the waves of life are never easy to ride, but these are our waves, and these are waves we have to ride. Nobody else can ride them for us, and in these waves we encounter outside sets of doubt and, closed out sets of fear, and, ultimately we have to find a path for ourselves. And there's a lot of paths to choose from. And if there's any question about the yoga path, take the time, read about it, and see. I mean, it's a pretty easy one, to decide to go, okay, well, at least I'll give it a try. And I think that's really all it takes. And I think that, where Pam and I are really on the same page on this, that try it out. Why not? What do you got to lose?
That's beautifully said. So as we talked about at the very start of this conversation, you were down in Baja, and in between we had a few ideas, but we're not going to share those with the audience right now of when you and I are going to talk next. But what does the balance of 2024 look like for Gerry Lopez? How long are you in Baja for? Any other trips, your activities or projects you have planned? What are you up to this year?
All I'm thinking about is surfing, man. The next time I get to go. And actually, when we're done here today, the ocean still looks pretty good. I might go back and take another look.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're going to get you out there really quickly. But before we do, we put out a feeler for questions from Instagram at the Lineup Pod. We got a lot back for Mr. Gerry Lopez, but we whittled them down to 3. First question is from @chris.fowler.187, who asks, the more connected you are to the sea and your breath, do you personally feel like doing less on the wave? Interesting question.
Well, all I've ever done was just stand there on my surfboard. So I don't know if I can do any less. But no, I get it. That, you know, it's a beautiful place, and anytime you're riding a wave, you are not only in a high state of mind, a very deep meditative state of mind. You have to be, otherwise you're going to fall off that surfboard. But you're in, like I said earlier, I think the most beautiful place there is in life.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Second question is from I am Matson, who asks, Gerry, what left-hander do you regret never surfing in your prime? That's assuming you're not in your prime now, but I get it. I take his meaning.
I'm definitely not in my prime now. Well, I mean, I look at that Skeleton Bay and go, oh my gosh, that is something else. You know, that's got to be the longest tube rides in the world. And I guess I'll save that one for the next lifetime.
Last one we picked is from @OldSurfDad. Gerry, what is the favorite board you've ever shaped?
Oh, usually the next one after the last one.
It's a great answer.
And that was the problem is, you know, is that when you're a shaper and you surf your own boards, is all the old ones are that, and they get left behind, and you go on to the new ones, and then a long time afterwards you go, boy, I should have hung on to that old one.
It's a good answer. Well, thank you to everyone who wrote in at the Lineup Pod. We're now down to our very final segment, which is the lightning round. You've done this before, and I have your answers from last time, so we'll get to compare and contrast. But these are the same 10 questions that we ask everybody at the end, and you can answer them, or please answer them as quickly as you can. All right.
On the spot.
On the spot, baby. If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad, bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Twin fin.
Okay, that's updated from thruster last time. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Last book you read?
I can't even remember.
Best surf film ever?
5 Summer Stories. Endless Summer.
Both good ones. What is one wave you never have to go back to?
Waimea Bay.
If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dreamcast it, perfect conditions, whoever you want out there, but what wave would that be?
To name a spot,
Sure.
I'd take any wave, anywhere,
I
left or right, big or small.
I like it. That's consistent with the theme of this conversation for sure. Who is the best person for you to share a lineup with?
Who's ever out there?
Who's the worst person to share a lineup with?
Myself.
Last one. I will next achieve a state of happiness by
Paddling out immediately.
I love it. Gerry Lopez, once again, a huge honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you for the conversation. For everyone that wants to check out Gerry and Pam's products, go to manduka.com. And yeah, Gerry, we're going to have you back on this year, I'm pretty sure. So appreciate it, man. I hope you get some waves after this.
Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure.